Gábor Somlyai now, who needs no introduction whatsoever, who's the man who's leading the area of deuterium depletion and the study of that. So I'm really grateful for the chance to interview you, and I've got a bunch of questions that I want to run past you, and these are typical frequently asked questions really about deuterium depletion, and also some to get into a little bit of more detail about how the science can guide us in our to inform us about what we should be doing. Okay, so I've got a bunch of questions to start off with. The first one is, where does our intake of deuterium come from?
There are two main sources of deuterium. One is the water, what we drink, and the food, what we eat. And of course, the food also contains some water, but the real question is the deuterium level of the dry components of the food. Because when we are eating the food and we burning, it will produce carbon dioxide and metabolic water. So finally, the D level of the drinking water and the deconcentration of the metabolic water will give and will determine the average deconcentration of a given person.
Mm-hmm. So really it's about the content of deuterium in water and in the water in the food?
In the food,
mm-hmm.
But not the water content of the food, the
mm-hmm.
key issue in that case, but the deuterium level of the carbohydrate, the lipids and the amino acids, mm-hmm. which finally during utilizing these carbon source can produce carbon dioxide and water, metabolic water. Mm-hmm. And the combination of these and the volume and the ppm concentration of these two water will give us an average D level mm-hmm. in our body.
And what about in terms of climate or location? Is there any difference in terms of if you lived in an industrial area or if you lived in a countryside or different altitudes?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the ocean, the deconcentration is 155 ppm, which means out of 1 million water molecules, there are 155 heavy water molecules. But when the clouds appear in the equatorial area and the clouds are moving to the North Pole, they losing easily or more easily the heavy hydrogen, the heavy water, and that way the deuterium level of the rain is decreasing as we are farther from the equatorial area. The D level also will decrease when we going up hillside or we are farther from the oceans. So it means that, for example, in Europe, in the middle part of the Europe, the deconcentration of the rain surface water and the rain water is about 145 ppm. So there is a 10 ppm decrease. If you go to the North and the South Pole, it could be about 130 ppm. And again, if you go up to the hillside in the Himalaya or very high altitude, the deconcentration could be 20-30 ppm lower than the deconcentration of the ocean. The food source, also the deuterium level of the food, also determined by the source of the food. It means that the banana and the orange has a higher D level just because the D concentration of the surface water is higher than in the north, close to the north area or in Europe.
Does that mean vegetables grown, say leafy vegetables grown in nearer the equator would have higher deuterium in the vegetable, resulting as opposed to somewhere in northern sort of altitude, not altitude, but northern hemisphere?
So if you're talking about the same vegetable, mm-hmm. Then the D level of the vegetable will determine by the concentration, the water in water. But there is another factor because the plants, depending on the biochemical pathway, how they can utilize or synthesize the carbohydrates, there are 3 different plants. And those plants, which typically lives in the equatorial area, they are producing not so depleted carbohydrates and organic compounds. Those plants which are in Europe or in this area, this is the so-called C3 plants, they are producing and synthesizing more depleted carbohydrates and organic compounds. So this also can influence our D level depending on what is the composition of our food, because itself just to eating vegetables is one thing, but the question is what is the ratio of these plants fixing the carbon dioxide according to the so-called C3 way or carbon 4 way, and that also can modify the D level of the human body.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that leads me really nicely to my next question, which is about can you tell us about the D level ppm ranges there are in different foods? So, like, for example, which are the highest and which are the lowest, so we can get an idea about that.
So when we started that type of research, I went to the shop and I bought sugar, cottage cheese, butter, and fat, and asked the scientists to take out the water from this food, and the dry food was burned to water and carbon dioxide. And they determined the deuterium level of this water, which was what we received after burning the food. And the point is that the carbohydrate deuterium level is close to 150 ppm. The amino acid has a lower. It means the cottage cheese has a lower. The butter has even lower, 138 ppm. But the fat has the lowest deconcentration. We measured 118 ppm deconcentration in the lipids. And knowing these numbers, it is clear after that if we are using up or eating 2000 calorie food, and the ratio how we cover this calorie intake, 80% with carbohydrates, it means our body will produce metabolic water with close to 150 ppm. But when we eating 50%, 60% with lipids of this 2000 calorie, that will produce 120 ppm metabolic water. And what we said at the beginning of this report, so that will determine the D level of the cell, which is this water is synthesized in the mitochondria, and after that the intercellular space, the deuterium level of the water will be determined with this metabolic water partially. And there are a couple of interesting food, which is for example the capsaicin, which makes the pepper very hot. There are data that the D level could be as low as 60 ppm. Also important to note, for example, the unsaturated lipids, the deuterium level distribution is just by chance in the long carbon source, but determine which carbon we can get a lower or higher deconcentration. For example, in a long lipid, which is containing 16 or 18 carbon, on the carbon 9, the D level could be 60 ppm, and on the carbon 13, again 60 ppm, but can be higher on the other carbon atoms on the long lipid molecules. And all these things is determined by the biochemical processes which are running in our cells.
Mm-hmm. So that's great. So can you, like, for example, give us examples of which foods could play the best role in keeping deuterium levels lower, and which foods, for example, would we want to avoid if our objective was to keep our deuterium level low or to lower it, for example?
Yeah, we run a phase 2 clinical study with diabetic patients, And we took a blood from 30 patients and we checked the blood deuterium concentration. And in that case, we found that the range was 146, 150 ppm. I think my grandfather, who ate much more bacon and much more fat, his deuterium level was about 135 ppm or 130 ppm. And I think that there was a big change in the diet during the last 50, 60 years. And one of the biggest changes that people today eat much more carbohydrate, lots of sugar and lots of other carbohydrates. And as I mentioned, the carbohydrate deuterium concentration 150 ppm. And that results that the population today worldwide in the developed countries, the concentration is about 146, 150 ppm because the diet.
In doing that, you think that would be best served by lowering our intakes of carbohydrates? So
yeah,
potatoes.
That was the question, and my answer is yes. So yeah, we should increase the reduce the carbohydrate intake and increase the lipid and all this food intake.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so next question I wanted to ask about is to do with the role that deuterium plays in different phases of life, versus childhood versus adulthood, and what basically happens to our body when we deplete the deuterium levels.
Yeah, I would start with a study we run with athletes. So in that study, we followed athletes. 7 of them consumed deuterium depleted water, 5 of them consumed normal water. And there was a loading test at the beginning of the experiment and at the end of the experiment. And it was very good to see that those who were consuming deuterium depleted water with 105 ppm for 44 days, their blood sugar level didn't decrease after the loading test, and the lactic acid appeared much later. It means that reducing their D level, the mitochondria work in their body more properly, and they could run the loading test on a better level, and this acidification appeared much later. So this suggests for everybody that the lower D concentration can help the cells to utilize the sugar on a more proper way and to utilize much high frequency or high capacity the sugar, and that way these athletes felt extremely good. They could repairing their whole metabolism much faster. So that was a clear evidence that lowering the D concentration it's more healthier and it's more healthy for the people, and it could be very useful even for athletes, not for everybody. And the other question is, so there were long ago papers that with the aging, the heavy isotopes of different elements is increasing in the body. Nitrogen, oxygen, and I don't know any data for deuterium, but there is some data that the heavy isotopes concentration is increasing during our lifetime. And there were other papers when they used heavy waters, and that reduced the lifespan of the test animals. So that may suggest that our lifetime there is some slow increase in the D concentration, just considering that the mitochondria is not so healthy and not so not properly working, and that can lead to that mitochondria are not able to produce as much as deuterium depleted metabolic water, and there is a slow increase, and that could be part of the aging process. We have run a study with an American university, and we just could prove the opposite, that the test animal lifespan was increased when we used deuterium depleted water. And we could prove that which gene was activated and which was the mechanism how the deuterium depleted water helped these small animals to increase the lifespan. So I guess we think that this is another aspect that it is very important. What is the deconcentration in our body?
What really is the optimal level of deuterium at the stage of life for a healthy person? In my age, of 40 years old, healthy person, what should my deuterium level be optimally? Where, if it's, for example, 150 now, for me, what would I have to do? What protocol would I have to do in order to lower it to a optimal level? And how long would it take? I guess is really what people are trying to understand about deuterium depleted water.
I think regarding our deuterium level, we should focus on two areas. One, the best would be if we do a big shock for the deconcentration every year, every second, third year for a couple of months. It means that during that time we should reduce sharply and definitely the deconcentration, let's say to 120 ppm or 110 ppm. But on a long term and the other part of the year, it would be good to keep it on 135, 130 ppm. The sharp and significant decrease of the concentration, that would eliminate all the cells which are not able to cope with the reducing the concentration, and keeping the D level lower than we have now with a 10-15 ppm. That would be very healthy for all the cells on the rest of the year. So this is what we recommend. And people we measured consuming 105 ppm for 3 months. Then the average from 147 went down to 133 ppm. So consuming water with 105 ppm for 3 months, that would reduce the D level to this range 130, 135, 140 ppm. And when somebody reach it, and during that period would be exclusive, would be good to consume DW exclusively. And when they reach it, then they can combine it with normal water and deuterium depleted water just to keep lower the D level.
Could the same person have got to that D level any other way, just by changing their diet or something like that, do you think?
Yeah, the other could be to change the ratio of the carbohydrate and lipid intake. So reducing somewhat the carbohydrate and increasing the lipid intake. That would be another way to reduce the deconcentration of the body. I'm sure we need additional research to figure out the differences between the different plants in detail, but I am sure that within a short period of time we will know and we will discover which molecule has a deuterium level at which point of the molecules, and which can be the role of that given molecule and the D level. But if we talk about in general to reduce the D level, that will be the two main sources.
Is it accurate to understand that foods that have low D levels are healthy for us, and foods that have very high D levels are unhealthy and should be limited, and the other ones that are good we should do more of? Is that a accurate way to understand nutrition fundamentally?
Yeah, it's a very tough question, because when you go to the university, the diet, according to the general diet, is okay, eat more carbohydrate because the fat was said, okay, it's a very bad and high cholesterol and increasing the heart attack and all the things. Now we come up with this deuterium level, and the data clearly shows that the deuterium are important in our living organism, but we cannot say that it is accepted worldwide, and the science has accepted that really the D concentration is a key element in that regulation. On the other hand, we are very sure that we cannot talk about always only one factor, because that was with the cholesterol, that somebody and the science said, okay, the cholesterol is dangerous and reduce it, and today I guess no one can agree with that this is the only factor, and we reduce the cholesterol intake that will solve the problem. It is much more complicated. And the similar situation with the deuterium also. It's a very important element of our body and the whole metabolism, and we need lots of study and lots of research to figure out all the details of this, and hopefully 20 years later we will know much more about and how to use out that type of use up that type of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Yeah. So for me, I'm hunting for information currently about different foods and different plants and root vegetables and all sorts of things to see what the different levels are showing. If this, it seems so far to be correlating with the kind of things that, yes, we need in our diet, but not so much, and we should actually have more green foods growing above the ground type vegetables, leafy green type vegetables in our diet, and less, what is really high in deuterium, for example?
Okay, that's another. So just recently I read a book about where the average span is pretty high. For example, the Hunza population, they live over 100 years and they are very healthy. And there are other couple of groups. For example, the key issue, the other issue is how much do you move? What is your physical activity? Because the diet is one thing, but what are you doing during the day? And it is very important, again, the physical activity also can modify the deuterium level in our body. Because when we start moving, in the first 15 minutes, we are using glucose from the liver. But after 15 minutes, they have to use the lipids, and we gaining the energy from the lipid. And if we using that lipid and we are burning the lipid during the exercises, we will producing lots of metabolic water with a low D concentration. So even if someone is on a vegetable, or vegan, or eating only vegetables, in the body, when they use up the vegetables, they will produce lipids, they will store it as a carbohydrate. But when you store the high carbohydrates coming from the vegetable as a lipid, that will be depleted in your body, and you getting back this energy from the lipid that will produce for you deuterium depleted metabolic water. So this is another issue. Okay, diet is important, but what is your daily activity? Just sitting in the chair and watching TV and drinking beer, and you can be vegetarian or whatever, but this is not enough to be healthy. In 1990, when I started to research the deuterium role in our living organism, and the first paper was from 1993. For today, we can say that over 100 scientists is working and doing research with deuterium depleted water. And I think there are two main concepts regarding the D level. One is that the lower the D level, the better. And the other is we have to find the optimal deuterium concentration. And to some extent, both concept is good, because the question is, what is our primary aim? For example, to prevent chronic disease, or to have a healthy life. This is the reason earlier I said, if someone is going to use deuterium depletion, I would recommend for a short period of time using very, very low D level, and that way stressing all the cells, and the healthy cells will adapt, they will be fine, but that way we can eliminate the the elder cells and the bad cells. And on a longer term, we have to find the optimum concentration and living our body and the whole metabolism using that optimal deuterium concentration. For example, we had a skin lotion with low D concentration, and we could see on the skin that the wrinkle disappeared and the skin became very smooth. So that would be a good evidence that making a short reduction in the D concentration, we could eliminate the elder cells of the skin surface, and that the whole outfit was much better and better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really. So there really is two good strategies, and it depends on the situation and what you're trying to accomplish, and you know, your short-term or longer-term goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been really useful, really educational content in this video. So it's really helped me understand more about, you know, I guess looking at deuterium in a more balanced way, I think, and yeah, I think that's right. Because I'll put a picture, maybe if I can, when we met up, when you came for the conference, we went for dinner, and then there's a picture, that's when we last saw each other in person. And now I'm less 20 kilos.
That looks good.
So that's mainly from just small diet change, and I've continued to use DDW water for 4.5 months now, and I didn't feel anything different for maybe 1.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
But my feedback, being a healthy person who drank DDW for 1.5 months, after that I noticed just more energy, just not feeling tired in the morning, you know, how I would like feel tired and having to do a new day. I felt lots of energy, and
this is typical. So this is typical. All the people who consuming, they come back and saying that they are with much more energy.
Yeah.
In real life.
Equally, like we're doing molecular hydrogen, so now hydroxy gas inhalation, which is hydrogen inhalation. At the same time, some of this, and it seems that, for example, when people do hydrogen inhalation, the first night they have really good sleep straight away. So it's kind of like both hydrogen deuterium in the same way. It seems to be deuterium depleting and some hydrogen gas inhalation or hydrogen. It seems to be helping in the same direction or having similar results in two different ways. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can confirm that when we electrolyze the water, the appearing hydrogen is very depleted for the deuterium level, because this is the way how the heavy water was produced 60 years ago, that when we split the hydrogen and oxygen, the hydrogen easily can be split the oxygen-hydrogen bond, but cannot do it with the deuterium. So the hydrogen is very deuterium depleted.
Brilliant. Yeah. So So those therapies seem to be working well together with inhalation of hydrogen gas, and with then drinking deuterium depleted water. If you were short-term trying to deplete deuterium for a short-term reason, and then if you were doing a kind of healthy person maintenance protocol, that could involve maybe testing your deuterium level once in a while, maybe every few years you can test your deuterium level, and you can also then decide how to change your diet, or maybe go for a period of water to as like your MOT for your car. So yeah, thank you, and thank you so much, Gábor. Really appreciate your insight into these questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.